Welcome to China Truths. Today we will bring you the following stories. Beijing has more than 100 United Front infiltration organizations in Sweden. NSA investigating Beijing-Backed hack of major U.S. telecommunications companies. British Columbia Premier asked Ottawa to help provincial parties vet candidates for foreign influence ties. Now, let's dive into the details. It's all covered in today's China Truths. Beijing has more than 100 United Front infiltration organizations in Sweden. At least 103 organizations in Sweden are linked to China's United Front Work Department, a Chinese Communist Party or CCP department engaging in overseas infiltration and espionage, according to an October 4 report by a Washington-based defense policy think tank. Beijing leverages a network of groups, some directly under the control of the United Front Work Department within its Central Committee, to carry out its United Front strategy to advance the Chinese government's interests overseas. A big part of the strategy involves exerting influence and control over Chinese diaspora communities and promoting favorable narratives about China under the CCP's rule. The Jamestown Foundation's report said the United Front-linked groups have allegedly infiltrated Sweden's culture, business, politics, and education sectors. In the cultural sphere, United Front organizations in Sweden promote the Beijing-approved version of Chinese culture through events and in exchanges with Sweden to deepen cultural ties while subtly aligning Swedish perceptions with the party's views, according to the report. The researchers named a few prominent cultural events as examples of Beijing's infiltration. They include the 2023 Chinese Cultural Night as part of the annual Stockholm Culture Night, which the China-Europe Cultural Association and the Chinese Artists Association in Sweden co-hosted in collaboration with more than 100 museums, theaters, galleries, libraries, and cultural institutions. In terms of the economy, China's United Front organizations in Sweden help local companies build connections with Beijing's institutions to serve the CCP's long-term goal of integrating foreign economies with that of China, increasing its leverage over and influence in Sweden's political economy, the report states. The organizations have also helped the Chinese regime with technology transfer, according to the report. Researchers named the head of the Sweden-China Entrepreneur Association and the North Europe Innovation Center and the vice chair of the China-Sweden International Technology Transfer Center, who work together to bring Swedish companies to Shenzhen and other cities in China. These efforts serve Beijing's broader strategy of making full use of overseas Chinese to attract funds, technology, and equipment for its goal of modernization, the report states. The report said United Front groups also promote Beijing's narratives in Sweden by acting as representatives of the Chinese diaspora community. These groups are presenting a united voice and acting as representatives of the broader Chinese community to align public opinion in Sweden with China's propaganda, shaping perceptions on issues of critical importance to the party, according to the report. The report states, for example, that in August 2022, after then U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, 20 Chinese-Swedish organizations issued a joint statement expressing strong indignation and severe condemnation of Pelosi's visit. These groups also hosted events to promote China's peaceful unification of Taiwan. The report also cites a Swedish media report identifying 233 Beijing's agents across Europe connected to the Chinese Communist Party's CCP, United Front system, shedding light on the extent of the party's influence abroad. Sweden was the first Western country to establish diplomatic relations with Beijing after the CCP took over mainland China, and the first country to sign a bilateral investment protection agreement with Beijing after the CCP's reform and opening up economic policies. In April, the head of the China-Europe Cultural Association, Chen Shuifei, was deported by the Swedish government for allegedly posing a serious threat to Sweden's national security. Chen was also the head of Green Post, a Chinese-language media outlet in Sweden. Most of the content of Green Post's reports directly reflected that of Chinese state media, according to Swedish broadcaster SVT. The Swedish security services found that Chen had allegedly cooperated with a Chinese intelligence officer and had contacts with the Chinese embassy and with people in Sweden who are connected to the Chinese government, according to the outlet. As to the extent of Beijing's infiltration through the activities of its United Front Work Department in the West, Chen Ximin, associate professor of political science at National Taiwan University, told the Epoch Times on October 5 that Beijing is taking advantage of the West's democratic, liberal, and pluralistic society to infiltrate and influence public opinion with its narratives. Zheng Yisuo, associate research fellow at Taiwan's Institute for National Defense and Security Research, told the Epoch Times on October 5 that anyone who is not on Beijing's side is a target for the United Front. Private enterprises in mainland China are all the targets of its United Front. Of course, democratic countries are also the targets of its United Front, he said. There are many Chinese in these democratic countries. These Chinese immigrants and expatriates, in Beijing's minds, belong to it and are subject to Beijing's control. Then, the CCP can win over some and recruit some overseas Chinese people to help with the United Front's work. So, the infiltration part of the United Front efforts also complements its intelligence gathering, which is the Western government's focus now. Tseng said Beijing uses some Chinese cultural exchanges, academic exchanges, and business partnerships for its United Front and intelligence work. For example, Sweden, as with many European countries, has mainland China as their largest trade market in Asia. So, the CCP can use business opportunities to carry out United Front activities, along with gathering intelligence and infiltration, he said. Chen Shimin said that Confucius Institutes are engaged in a very deliberate cultural infiltration under the United Front and that there are some economic groups and chambers of commerce that are engaged in very obvious economic activities for the United Front. If Western governments can find connections between them and the CCP, then of course these become legal matters, as they are interfering in the internal affairs of Western countries and destroying the democratic values and freedom of Western countries, he said. But the problem is that it may not be easy to find this evidence. Tseng said that the most important countermeasure to Beijing's infiltration through United Front work is cultivating awareness and alertness. If everyone has this awareness, they will be able to reduce and weaken the CCP's infiltration effects, rendering it futile, he said, noting that the CCP's economy cannot recover in a short time as China is currently facing significant economic strain. He suggested that if all countries systematically investigate and block it, and warn their people about it, letting the whole world know about it, it will make sure the CCP's infiltration efforts are in vain, wasting its own resources. I think this is an effective countermeasure, Tseng said. Chen Shimin agreed, saying that the most important thing now is that Western countries have begun to be vigilant in the past 10 years. He cited the United States as an example. They prefer to hire more Chinese language teachers from Taiwan to teach Chinese in the United States because they know that many of those who come from mainland China to teach Chinese in the United States carry out the CCP's political purpose, the purpose of the United Front, he said. The United States does not want to have that. The Epoch Times reached out to the China-Europe Cultural Association, the Chinese Artists Association, and the Sweden-China Entrepreneur Association for comment but did not receive a response by publication time. NSA investigating Beijing-backed hack of major U.S. telecommunications companies. National Security Agency Director General Timothy Ha said the Chinese government-backed hack on major American telecommunications companies is under investigation. The hack was first reported by the Wall Street Journal on October 5. Ha told a small group of reporters on October 6 at the Cipher Brief Conference that details about the investigation could not yet be made public. According to the Wall Street Journal, hackers had access to several broadband services providers, including AT&T, Verizon, and Lumen Technologies, for months or longer, amounting to a major national security risk. We're really at an initial stage, he said, according to the Cipher Brief, noting that the intelligence agencies have seen that the Chinese government is going to be very aggressive in targeting critical infrastructure. During the conference, Ha outlined the threat from Beijing. The scope and sophistication at which the People's Republic of China continues to grow its capabilities and extend its global reach is matched only by the sheer scale and speed of which it acts, Ha said. It has enhanced its actions in cyberspace, where the PRC represents the most daunting of our threats. Lumen Technologies disclosed in a blog post in August that hackers took advantage of vulnerabilities in the Versa Director software platform. 4 U.S. targets and 1 Indian firm were targeted, but the companies were not named at the time. Versa Networks confirmed 3 unnamed victims, including an internet service provider. At the time, Lumen researchers said they were moderately confident that the hack was related to Beijing-backed, ongoing hacking campaign Volt Typhoon and that internet companies were targeted so that Beijing could surveil the customers. Ha said he was incredibly confident in the United States' ability to counter China's cyber threat because we value transparency. When intelligence officials disclosed the Volt Typhoon threat last year, it had a ripple effect among lawmakers, the private sector, and even other countries, which took action to close vulnerabilities. We've now seen all of them be successful, Ha said. That's an exemplar of what we can be doing. We've done over 70 advisories about these threats, and in many cases those advisories are at the keystroke level of what is an adversary doing, how are they doing it, and how can we counter it. Beijing has strengths in areas such as scale and control-enabling technologies, but according to Ha, its heavy-handed approach to expanding aggressively on foreign soil may now be a setback. China currently faces several domestic crises caused by its own policy, a collapsed real estate industry that had propped up the Chinese economy, evaporating foreign investment, and a shrinking workforce and population. Now, global trade partners are putting up barriers, and China will find it increasingly difficult to offset these domestic issues financially, Ha said. Addressing these challenges will require innovative thinking by PRC leaders. However, the Chinese Communist Party's tighter, authoritarian grip could very well stifle the ability of the PRC and will to navigate its most pressing challenges, he said. American principles of freedom of belief and private ownership give the United States a competitive advantage in countering China, he said. These principles have given rise to diverse innovation and dynamic public-private partnerships. The more the National Security Agency has shared about China's cyber threat with agencies and companies, the more these entities collaborate, Ha said. Truly, the cyber domain is created by industry. And it is industry who will most directly impact our collective ability to defend U.S. interests and those of our allies, he said. The value that we place on freedom of thought allows us to innovate and partner quickly, contradicting the PRC's mindset of centralized control. According to Ha, collaboration is critical because Beijing, as an authoritarian entity, can leverage a whole-of-state approach to achieve its goals. The relationships we are building today allow us to achieve agility, scale, and capabilities that would not otherwise be available to us. It's the competitive advantage our nation has over the PRC, he said. British Columbia Premier asked Ottawa to help provincial parties vet candidates for foreign influence ties. Amid heightened foreign meddling concerns, British Columbia or BC Premier David Eby asked the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor if Ottawa could help political parties in his province vet names for nefarious foreign ties, according to records submitted to the Foreign Interference Commission. A list of questions Eby reportedly asked National Security and Intelligence Advisor, NSIA, Jody Thomas at a meeting was entered as evidence at the inquiry on October 7. The undated document says that Eby raised the topics of foreign interference, election security, countering fentanyl, organized crime, money laundering, corruption, and strengthening provincial and community security. Officials from the Privy Council Office or PCO, which houses the NSIA, told the inquiry they weren't aware when the meeting took place and at whose request. Thomas retired in January 2024. Premier Eby asked if there was a mechanism for BC political parties to check names with federal national security authorities for covert ties to foreign states or significant organized crime links, says the PCO account of the meeting. The document doesn't mention what Thomas's answers to Eby's questions were, but it includes draft responses prepared by PCO. Federal security and intelligence agencies don't conduct political party checks as part of their legislated mandates, the document said. Eby had requested a briefing from the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, SISE, in 2023 amid a series of intelligence leaks in the press depicting widespread interference by Beijing. Eby expressed concerns over reports Beijing allegedly meddled in Vancouver's 2022 municipal election. His request followed a Globe and Mail article citing a secret 2022 SISE report alleging that China's former consul general, Tong Xiaoling, used proxies within the local Chinese community to help elect a mayor and city councillor favored by Beijing. Eby also wrote to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in June, requesting that SISE share information to help fight foreign interference at the provincial level. The province is currently in an electoral campaign with residents going to the polls on October 19. The PCO document on Eby's meeting with Thomas says the BC Premier raised additional questions regarding elections and foreign interference, including whether he would be notified if any of his nominees or candidates had undue contact with foreign states. He also inquired about how he would be informed of any foreign state interference in provincial elections and how he should notify opposition leaders if such interference occurred. It's unclear what authority the BC Premier has to request or be in receipt of this information, PCO wrote in response. Canadian political party candidates and nominees are accorded the same rights as all Canadians, including freedom of assembly and rights against unreasonable search and seizure. When asked about the responses to Eby, PCO Assistant Secretary to the Cabinet Nabi Eldebs told the inquiry the newly passed Bill C-70, which addresses foreign interference, now empowers SISE to share information beyond the federal government. I think that both the intelligence agencies, SISE and CSE, or Communications Security Establishment, have robust measures now, particularly after Bill C-70 had passed, Eldebs said.